Dreams
and Nightmares
with Poe and Munro. So, Robin's had this dream recently. I'm looking through an album of family photos, but I don't recognize anyone in the photos. I'm trying to remember their names, but I can't. And then I realize that my family are all standing around me and they're all crying because I've forgotten who they are. Oh, Robin, that sounds like quite a horrible one to wake up to every day. What do you think, Poe? What do you think this perhaps could represent?
Well, Munro, I think with the photos and the family, so I think there is perhaps Robin has a willingness or wish to reconnect with her family, but it's just not possible for Robin because perhaps there are issues, and it's just perhaps not how it used to be. They want to reconnect, or perhaps they can't reconnect, and they're feeling the pressure that they maybe have not attended to their family as they wanted to, as the family had wanted to.
Well, Poe, if I'm honest, you are quite right that the situation is related to painful emotions from the past. Now, the photo albums, they represent your past, Robin, so forgetting also suggests that you're feeling overwhelmed. But in this case, family represents feeling warm and loved. The crying can signify, once again, those negative emotions that you're feeling. Now, from what I'm taking from this, Robin, I think you're finding it hard to break away from a painful situation that's happened in your past. And you feel overwhelmed by the emotions caused by it. And if I'm honest, I just want to let you know that so many of us go through situations like this. So, Robin, you're not alone in this. And I know, by the sounds of it, this dream feels very sad, and it feels like it's full of grief. Robin, you're not alone. There are so many of us that go through situations like this, so similar to yours, but please don't hesitate to reach out to those that you love.
You're so right, Munro, and I think just by hearing your words, I think Robin can take heart and can understand what's going on. I think that already could be the beginning of finding answers to the sadness.
Well, I hope so, Robin, and thank you for your dreams.
Welcome to Poe's Curiosity Shop. Now, what could the object I've just handed to you be?
I have never seen anything like this. So, it feels heavy again. And I think, I want to say, it's wooden.
Yes.
And there's a handle, and then it kind of looks like a bell shape.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
Like a wooden bell with a large handle.
Yeah, it kind of looks like a non-functional wooden bell.
Yeah, but it's heavy, like really heavy.
Okay, I'm going to explain. The reason why it's heavy, it's in fact an Egyptian maul, which was used by craftsmen to carve temples. It's approximately 4,500 years old and comes from an ancient burial ground called Saqqara. This particular one has traces of the same limestone as the Great Sphinx of Giza. Well, that's what the man down the pub told me.
That's incredible.
Poe's Curiosity Shop is now closed.
You're listening to Radio August, Dark Nights with Poe and Munro.
Lung, read by Jesse Cox. She must be early 20s. The white robes barely cover her, soaked in blood. How very traditional, thinks Lung, lighting up another cigarette. Cough, cough, cough. The dais, if you can call it that, is a mossy slab beside Carnby Stream. The clouded sky picks out highlights in the water as it travels past jutting rocks and reeds. It's a calming juxtaposition to the lifeless vessel in front of him. Cough, cough. Coughing violently and uncontrollably, Lung adds his own blood sample to the victim's. He drops a barely touched cigarette to the floor and squishes it with his boot heel. Wiping his mouth with a now bloodied sleeve, he reaches into his jacket for something. Another cigarette. Gotta find me a good one, he mumbles. After lighting up, he produces a phone from his jacket It hits a speed dial number. After a few rings, it's answered. Mrs. Hedges. I think I found her. It's not good, I'm afraid. Cough. Cough. Coughing up blood, the girl gurgles out a shriek and raises up from the dais. Although it may be, whispers Lung, before hanging up the phone. He steps backwards wearily, brandishing a revolver at the girl, and calls out, Hey, you! And then more worriedly, Who are you? Looking down at her semi-naked, blood-drenched body, the girl sighs and turns her attention to Lung. Did you murder her? Lung squirms a little. Cough. 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 A lot of people wanted Zoe dead. I did them a favor, and I got a meeting with you. The girl draws her robes tightly, steps off the dais, and moves slowly towards Lung. And what did you want exactly? Lung steps backwards in rhythm with the girl. I'm dying. I don't want to die. You said you could grant me eternal life. The girl snarls at him. I did. That was before I knew you were a killer. Her pace quickens. Cough. Cough. Coughing more blood, Lung swipes with his sleeves and stands his ground. Then you can go back to hell, or wherever it is you came from. Bang! 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 The bullets whip holes through her chest, and blood arcs ferociously from the wounds. She staggers with each impact, then begins to sprint at Lung. What the fuck? Lung crosses his arms to shield himself as the girl leaps onto him, crashing him backwards onto the grassy floor. Thud! Crunch! His head hits the angled stone with such force his eyes bulge. Blood pools behind him and in his mouth. You're mine now, the girl says, and reaches her hand into his chest, grabbing for something or letting something go. It only takes a second. A transfer of energy takes place that can only truly be visualized by travelers from a faraway dimension. Lung's eyes roll into the back of his skull. He stops moving. The stream flows smoothly in the distance. The girl reaches for something in Lung's jacket. The phone. She hits speed dial. Mom? It's Zoe. I know. It was the detective you hired. He tried to kill me. I know. As fast as I can. I love you too. Okay. Bye. She puts the phone back, and her hand stops. Shaking. It moves as if it has a mind of its own. She tries to resist the movement, but it's too strong. It darts into the jacket and pulls out a cigarette. She sighs as she lets it put the cigarette to her lips and lights it. Cough. Cough. Coughing like it's her first smoke. She looks down pitifully at Lung and shrugs. Gotta find me a good one.
You're listening to Radio August. Dark Nights with Poe and Munro.
Nightmares by Angela Adkins. Read by Jessa from the Jessa Channel. I didn't know where she came from. I was driving along, playing with the radio, and all of a sudden there's this woman standing in front of my car. Naturally, I slammed on the brakes and attempted to swerve away from her, but I still felt the thump of solid body connecting with my car. There simply was no denying that sickening thump. When my car finally skidded to a full stop, I thought my heart would burst from my chest. It was pounding so hard. My hands trembled as I put the car in park, and I just sat there. The hum of the engine and a distorted voice from the now crackling speakers were my only company as I simply sat there. Everything in my head was screaming for me to go, to run. No one saw me. No one knew I even went for a drive. I could just run and, God forgive me, leave her there to be someone else's problem. But I couldn't do it. I had to know. I had to know if I had just killed this girl. So I took a deep breath and looked in my rear view mirror. The red glow of my brake lights illuminated the lump lying in the road behind me. A body. There was definitely a body. Run. Everything still screamed at me to flee. The feeling in your gut when you know something awful is going to happen and you need to get the fuck out of Dodge before you get caught up in it was raging in me, but here I was, unfastening my seatbelt and making myself open the car door. The interior lights came on and the annoying ding sounded to remind me that the keys were still in the ignition. I left my door open as I cautiously walked back towards a body that lay unnaturally twisted atop the pavement. I wanted to say I was breathing, but in all honesty, I think I was holding my breath, afraid to get a whiff of death. I was certain that it was a smell that would never let me sleep at night again. My legs felt like jello as I approached. One hand on the side of my car for support, the other outstretched in front of me, as if ready to catch myself when I inevitably passed out. I took a deep breath and lowered myself to the ground. "Miss?" My voice cracked and I cleared my throat, trying to retain the masculine depth that was currently hiding behind the remnants of puberty as fear swelled within me. "Miss, are you okay?" She lay on her back. Well, mostly on her back. Her legs were twisted onto her side, but her upper body was twisted, with her back flat on the road, face staring up into the sky. I saw her chest rise and fall. She was breathing, short and shallow breaths, but she was breathing. I looked her over. Her face was partially covered in bloody hair. I clasped my hand over hers, reassuring her as she lightly squeezed my hand. I spoke to her. "Hang on, I'm going to call for help. Just please don't die." I tried to stay calm as I pulled my phone from my pocket and dialed. Her hand squeezed mine, just a little tighter, as I began to pull her hair away from her face. Her breath was becoming much more shallow, and her grip weakened. The operator answered after the second ring. "Hello? What is your emergency?" I hit a woman. It was dark. I didn't see her. I came around the curve and she was just there and I hit her and she's twisted weird and... My calm was unraveling. "Sir, calm down." I could hear her typing what I was telling her. "Where did this happen?" I looked down at the girl as her chest stopped rising. Her eyes didn't blink and she no longer gripped my hand. I was gripping hers. I knew she was dead, but I still clung to her hand. Then she was gone. The blacktop rippled in front of me. It turned into waves that grew into a deeper and richer blue, like satin sheets, like satin bed sheets. In my car, I was driving on. I stopped and blinked a few times as I sat up in my bed, phone clenched tightly in my hand. "Sir, where were you driving? What road was the accident on?" I hung up. Sweat drenched my pajamas and I was safe at home. My immediate reaction was to get up and run down to the garage to check my car. I was in such a rush that I let down the last 3 stairs and nearly killed myself as I jumped over the family dog sleeping in the kitchen doorway. I opened the door from the kitchen to the garage and flipped on the lights. I fell down in the doorway and cried. My car was there. It was pristine. It was just a nightmare. I was still on the floor, wiping my eyes as I saw the familiar red and blue lights reflecting through my kitchen window. This should be a fun thing to explain. I pulled myself to my feet and headed towards the door, ready to show the officers my car and prove that it wasn't real, just a vivid dream. But my stomach dropped as I opened the door. It had only been moments since I'd made the call. There was no way they made it out to my house that fast. I watched them walk up the driveway and see their mouths moving, but it takes a while to hear what they're saying. Do you understand? Your daughter's been in a fatal accident. I'm so sorry. It's only then I dropped the phone. I don't hear the metal frame thunk the ground or the glass shards that splinter from the screen, because at that moment, that very moment, she's with me again, gripping my hand tightly.
You're listening to Radio August. Dark Nights with Poe and Munro.
Arms Wide, read by Adam Day. From this height, nighttime London sparkles. Arms wide, I dive from the roof of the Mandela Tower block. Gravity accelerates me towards the pavement, 32 stories below. Tenzin taught me that the secret was to never hit the ground. There's a blue steel dumpster at the back of the Dreamtime Hotel on 39th Street, Queens. Was home for a while. Woke up one morning to find Tenzin rooting around in there. Words were spoken, fists were raised. The truth is, there was enough food for two, and I needed the company. Between us, we slept in shifts to guard that dumpster and chase the rest of the street off. That spring, we lucked out with a broken fire door, easy access to the stairwells, the room service carts, and a roof with a view to die for. In our idle chatter, I pieced together fragments of Tenzin's story. A former monk, expelled for some scandal involving a woman. I guess that's how most of them fall. He had wisdom, though. Of that I have no doubt. The night Tenzin left, he taught me how the universe worked. I close my eyes as the concrete rises up to embrace me. There are infinite realities, he said, and we always exist in the one we believe is most true. The roof of the Dreamtime Hotel was littered with Tenzin's white cigarette butts, like scattered finger bones. He gave me one long final grin. And I believe I'm immortal. I watched him jump, red and gold robes billowing in the wind, shimmering into nothingness long before the ground. Scent is always the first sense to return. Salt to air assaults my nostrils. I arrived to a cacophony of traffic, stood upon the side of the Golden Gate Bridge, the sun sliding into the Pacific. The view is breathtaking, but it's still not home. I climb over the 4-foot fence onto the railings below. Arms wide, I dive.
Dreams
And nightmares.
with Poe and Munro. Now, this is a particularly interesting one. So this is coming from Marek, and they say, I'm in a circus, walking on a tightrope across a pool of sharks, but the sharks don't seem to notice me. They're busy playing poker. I fall, but I never hit the water. Now, this in particular, I think, is very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think, Poe?
Yeah, I think it has several interesting elements to it. from the sharks, I mean, often sharks, they stand for perhaps some danger that's lurking, perhaps represented as danger of certain people, people that this listener perceives as dangerous to them, and never falling, and then never falling and never hitting the water. I mean, it's you're kind of lost. You're never reaching your end goal. But these are kind of unrelated thoughts. So I'm hoping that you, Munro, as always, can string these things together.
Well, you weren't far off, I'll be honest, Poe, but there are different elements here that I'd like to discuss. So, firstly, the idea of a circus. Now, when you go to the circus, it's massive, and it's a crazy experience, and some people love it, some people hate it. But what it actually relates to is being out of control. Now, the tightrope itself, what is one of the main things you have to consider when you're walking on a tightrope? Not that you would know, Poe, obviously, or maybe you do.
I hardly ever. I'm in control. No, I know what you mean. Yeah, there is, the stakes are high.
But what else do you need?
Oh, yeah, you need to balance. You need the balance.
Exactly, that's exactly right. So what the tightrope refers to is actually the balance in your life. Now, you were exactly spot on, actually, about the sharks being something negative. But in this case, the sharks actually refer to the negative people that are in your life. So, what I think from what you said about your dream is that you're trying so hard to keep your life balanced and to avoid the negative people in your life. And I also think that you are worried that if you stop doing everything that you do, you detract their attention.
Yeah, because they're busy. They're busy in his dream, aren't they?
They are, and you said that the sharks don't seem to notice you because you're just carrying on as normal. But Marek, what I'd like to say to you is that maybe you're worrying too much about these negative people. If what you're doing is a positive thing, then you should always be receiving positive things in return. If they're a negative person, you don't necessarily need to give them all of your time and your emotions. So perhaps, Marek, you need to take a step back, I think, in this case.
Very good.
Thank you for your dreams. You're listening to Radio August, Dark Nights with Poe and Munro.
Welcome to Poe's Curiosity Shop. Okay, so please explain to the listeners what the object is that you are holding.
I mean, it's very, very heavy. It's wooden, and...
Correct.
It's got engravings on it. I think are they animals?
There could be animals. And some people might interpret them as animals.
But there's 4 figures on it. Perhaps walking across, maybe?
What was the object used for, what do you think?
Only use I can see is maybe to hang something on? Like a coat or...
You could do that, but it's good house, kind of it's a household item.
I honestly...
I doubt you've ever used one of those. You've never used a mangle.
A mangle?
Yeah.
For clothing?
Yeah. Its only job is literally to flatten bed sheets. That's what it is.
Really?
Yeah. Nobody takes that amount of care nowadays. But this particular mangle was used to crush 4 young women in Kiruna in the 1960s.
Oh my gosh.
They were all identical quadruplets, aged 17. Apparently, their essence remains ingrained in the mangle. But I obviously can't vouch for that.
Why were they crushed?
Good question. I do not know.
Oh gosh. You can have it back.
I personally just use it to flatten bed sheets. Poe's Curiosity Shop is now closed. Welcome to Poe's Curiosity Shop. Okay, Munro, here's the object for today.
It's definitely made out of silver.
Well done. It is made of silver.
It sort of looks like a whistle.
Yeah, that's part of it. Whistle.
I'm not sure what the ball on the end's for.
Well, it's a silver rattle and whistle.
Oh.
It was found within a sealed well at St. Augustine's, along with the bones of 17 children.
Oh.
It was discovered just over a decade ago, after a sudden sinkhole in the graveyard exposed the well's contents. So that's quite a history to it, doesn't it?
That sounds awful.
Yeah, quite creepy. Poe's curiosity shop is now closed.
Dreams
And nightmares.
with Poe and Munro. Okay, so we've heard from Alex, and Alex has said that they have the same dream every night. Now, it's a woman lying in a lake with her eyes closed and her black hair streaming beneath the surface. She must be dead. No one can breathe that long underwater. Then she opens her eyes, and I realize it's not her that's underwater. I mean, this one sounds quite dark and complex, Alex, so we really, really thank you for sharing this with us. Now, Poe, do you have any ideas what this might represent?
The closing of the eyes, I mean, that's interesting. So she wants to, at least the person she's observing in the dream is not, or does not want to face the world. And then when she opens her eyes, it's not her. So it's almost the person who's dreaming is trying to project onto the other person that they're closing themselves off from the world, perhaps, but then they're realizing they're doing it themselves.
You know, Poe, I think you're actually getting a lot better at this.
Thank you very much.
So, obviously, once again, Alex, thank you very much for sharing this one with us. I would love to talk about this one in further detail because actually it's dealing with something that's quite emotional, because the imagery of the lake actually, it relates to your emotional state of mind. And now, the black hair in this dream actually also relates to the repression of emotion. And then the drowning actually relates to emotional stress. So if I'm honest, Alex, and I hope you're listening to me now, I believe that perhaps something is weighing heavily on your mind, and perhaps it's a secret about someone else that you have. Perhaps it's something that you share, and it's something that you have in common. And obviously, as we know, repression of emotion can be quite bad for the soul. So I really hope that, Alex, that you find someone to reach out to. But thank you again for sharing with us.
Oh, I'm so impressed again, Munro. You're so observant.
I try.
Hopefully, this lady can take something from this.
Thank you for your dreams.
You're listening to Radio August, Dark Nights with Poe and Munro.
The Catch, read by John Mark Clawson. Ivan was woken by the crowing of his cat. This was nothing new. He opened his eyes to find Uni standing on his chest, her mottled face inches from his, her demanding purr drilling into his ribcage through her paws. He lifted a numb hand and rubbed her cheek. "Sleep," he whispered. It was a hopeful plea, feebly delivered. Uni's reply, a loud and indignant meow, was an order. This could only mean one thing. Ivan sat up, scooped Uni to the floor, and pulled on a t-shirt. She waited for him to stand, then led him down to the kitchen, herding his slow bare feet in dangerously tight circles. Uni was a hunter, and experience told Ivan she'd got something to show him. He hoped it was a mouse or a vole. At least they were always dead. He'd had too many stunned, lopsided sparrows flapping around his kitchen. One robin, several blackbirds, usually downy fledglings with wide beaks and tails that hadn't even grown yet. Last time, she caught a magpie. It was bigger than her body, yet she still picked it up to present to him. Its pitiful cack, 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 its only protest. He'd had to put that one out of its misery. He put all of them out of their misery. A stamp to the head, the tiniest cracking of skull, blood and feathers on the ground. It was kinder that way. The kitchen was quiet. The small, heaped body on the mat by the cat flap didn't seem to be moving. These were all good signs. White fur. What is that? A rat? No, not a rat. A cat. Smaller than a cat. A kitten. Ivan stared at Uni. She circled the kitten's body, stepping over its limp legs without even looking, her eyes fixed on him, waiting for what? He crouched down for a closer look. The kitten's eyes were open. Blue, pink nose, pink ears, so fluffy. The cutest thing. We're on to kittens now, Uni? Uni meowed. Ivan pushed himself up and went to get a towel. When he returned, the kitten was scrambling at the mat with its front paws, trying to drag itself up. Its back legs lay helplessly on the floor. No, no, no. Ivan dropped down next to the kitten. Shh. It's okay. It's okay. Tears blurred his vision. He stroked the kitten with the side of his finger. Don't move, okay? Just don't try to move. But the kitten wouldn't stop struggling, suffering. Ivan clenched the towel, then draped it over the kitten's head. He stood and raised his foot. It would have to be a good one. Harder even than a magpie. One and done. The kitten's skull was softer than he expected. It caved easily, the thin bones crackling and fizzing with bubbling blood. The wet towel stuck to his heel as he lifted it, unveiling the bloody mess he'd made, and he quickly replaced it, shutting his eyes hard to try to erase the sight. It didn't work, of course. Ivan slumped to the floor as Uni padded over to inspect the darkening towel. Blood trickled along the groove of the floor tiles, and she lowered her head to lap it hungrily. Ivan pushed her away. Not for you, Uni. He just needed a moment. He sat in silence until he could no longer hear his own breathing, until Uni stopped pacing and sat grudgingly opposite him, until the blood slowed and started to dry. Finally, he shifted onto his knees and lifted the kitten in both hands. Its floppy body barely as big as his palms, he left the towel on the floor. He'd need it to clean up later. He held the kitten against his chest, partly as an apology, partly so he wouldn't have to see it, and made his way back to the bedroom with Uni in soft pursuit. Nola was awake. Not even she could sleep through Uni's wake-up calls. She was sitting up, cross-legged, thumbing her phone, but put it down on the bedside table as soon as Ivan walked in. I thought I heard something going on, she said, smiling. Uni jumped up on the bed and Nola leaned forward to nuzzle her nose. Have you brought something for Mummy? Ivan perched on the edge of the bed and placed the kitten on the duvet. Did you order this? He asked. His voice sounded shakier than usual. Didn't I mention it? She started pulling at the fur. She hadn't mentioned it. Ivan would have remembered. He lay down and closed his eyes, listening to her tearing the kitten's skin. Thanks, babe, she said, between chews. No worries, said Ivan. Anything for you.
Welcome to Poe's Curiosity Shop. So, what do we have here?
Well, this is certainly interesting. This, I would say you have to hold with two hands. And so I'd say it's heavy because it's made out of metal. Mm-hmm. And also there's some color on there as well. I think it's like a green. It's like green paint with some engraving on it.
Yes, what kind of situation or scene do we have depicted there? What do you think?
Well, what I think I can see is perhaps two people in combat.
Could be combat.
Maybe they're hugging.
It's funny that you mentioned combat first, because most people actually think this is an erotic scene. And then the second point you made was that it might be people hugging, but most people think it shows an erotic scene. This is one of many painted leaden plates from the Khazars, and as such, it's over 1,000 years old. And it's not an erotic scene. It's not people hugging. It's not combat. It's actually a man grabbing the heart of a woman directly from her chest.
He sounds great.
Yeah, what a nice guy. It was a practice that was thought of as surgery at the time, but it never really ended well. I mean, that's kind of quite a literal broken heart that we see there.
I can imagine.
Poe's Curiosity Shop is now closed. Welcome to Poe's Curiosity Shop. Alright, so what have we here today?
I actually think this one's a little bit clearer than other ones we've had on previous shows. This one is also heavy, because everything seems to be made out of wood and metal. So this one has got a heavy metal handle, and then it's got a circular face, and what looks like could have perhaps been maybe a shiny metal.
Mm-hmm.
And
Where do you think it's from?
Where is it from?
Area?
Oh,
where in the world is this from?
Europe?
No.
Just trying to think.
A while ago we had a story from this part of the world as well. Do you remember?
China?
No.
Mexico?
No.
I mean, we could just name every country you've ever had on the show.
Do you remember the queen who was undressing? It's from there. Egypt.
Oh, it's from Egypt.
Yes. So, I'm going to explain it to you. It's more about what you can do. What do you think you might do with a mirror?
If I'm honest, at first, because of the handle, I thought maybe a weapon of combat. But then if I look at it more closely, I would say a mirror, a handheld mirror.
You're right. Well done, Munro.
Wow.
But it's not just a mirror. It's something you might do your makeup in or check your hairstyle. By the way, you have impeccable hairstyle today.
Thank you very much,
as usual. It's a reflecting mirror, but it was used for teleportation. Allegedly, you could look in the mirror, close your eyes, think of being somewhere else, and you're there.
Should we try it now?
No, I've tried it. It doesn't work for me.
Oh.
Maybe it works for you. You try it.
Okay, so I'm just going to imagine somewhere else. And...
she's gone, listeners. It's amazing. No, she hasn't.
We're only joking.
She's still
here.
Yeah, she's still here. I can't do this show without her.
And I can't do it without you, Poe.
Oh, that's so nice. Poe's Curiosity Shop is now closed. You're listening to Radio August. Dark Nights with Poe and Munro.
Dmitri's Descent by Chris Hoppenbrouwers. Read by The Raw Geek. Dmitri stared out into the pitch-black darkness outside of his bedroom window. It felt unnatural to be here, in this place, so far away from home. With some regret, he thought back to the day he volunteered for a top-secret project at an undisclosed location. When he had first heard those words, undisclosed location, he had assumed the location would be somewhere on Earth. Instead, he now found himself on the far side of the moon. Dr. Dmitri Sheffield, an expert in the field of archaeology, hadn't had a breath of fresh air in 8 months. This, combined with the moon's low gravity, a lack of sunlight, the station's depressing food pastes, and the project's mounting work pressure, had gone so far to affect his physical appearance. He had even started to avoid mirrors, in fear of catching a glimpse of himself, a pale, gaunt carcass of a man, more akin to a ghost than any living being. But the work kept him going. It had to. Dmitri kept reminding the others, and himself, that they were writing history here. Unimaginable discoveries had been made these last few months. Discoveries he had never dared dream of, much less be a part of. When he and the other scientists first arrived here, their excitement had been almost unbearable. But that initial spark of enthusiasm had faded like a falling star in the night sky. On the morning of his 249th day on the moon, or was it night? It was hard to tell up here. Dmitri boarded the elevator to the excavation site, as he had been doing for the last 248 days. He was joined in the elevator by the other 3 members of his scientific team. Dr. Ian Remington, Dr. Hanako Yutani, and Dr. Wolfgang Whitfield were all experts in their fields, those being paleontology, linguistics, and exobiology respectively. Dmitri glanced at them and for the first time noticed their hollow cheeks and the dark circles under their eyes. It seemed the moon had taken its toll on Earth's best and brightest. As they waited for the elevator to reach the bottom, they went through their schedule for the day, which centered around their latest discovery, a hole of less than 2 meters wide that seemed to go on for several kilometers into the ground. Its edges were most unusual in that they were astonishingly smooth down to a molecular level. Indeed, it was clear that this hole was not a natural formation. But neither could it have been man-made. The hole was drilled, or otherwise created, over 50 million years ago, long before the dawn of the first man. This was one of the few things they had been able to ascertain about their mystifying discovery, and the 4 scientists knew there was much more to be done. The plan, then, was to send more probes down the hole in order to determine how much deeper it went. They had been doing this for the last 14 days, much to Dmitri's growing frustration. At this point, Dmitri started to wonder if the pit even had a bottom, and dreaded what they would find there if it did. "Is it really wise to send more probes down the hole?" Dmitri asked as they went over their plans. The 3 other scientists looked at him questioningly as they waited for him to elaborate. "All probes so far have malfunctioned at a depth of 500 meters. Are we really planning to do the same thing while expecting different results?" "Are you calling us insane?" asked Dr. Whitfield, pretending to be offended. "Do you have another suggestion?" Dr. Yutani offered. Without much thought, Dmitri blurted out, "We could send a person down there." Then, again without thinking, added, "One of us, perhaps." The others eyed him with concern. "I'm not sure that's wise," said Dr. Remington, clearly echoing the thoughts of the other 2 scientists. Perhaps it was Dmitri's frustration with the project's slow progress, and his eagerness for a breakthrough, that prompted him to volunteer himself, much to the surprise of the others. "I will," he insisted. "I'll do it." The 3 scientists all looked at each other, silently wondering if Dmitri had gone crazy, but they were too tired, too drained to argue. "Well," Dr. Whitfield conceded with a sigh, "if you're really that sure about it." The others offered no protest. "All right, Dr. Sheffield, you're all hooked up and ready to go." The crew member, who had helped him put on his rappelling harness, performed a final check on the crane, which was normally used for lowering the much lighter probes down the abyssal shaft. Dr. Remington had initially objected to using the feeble apparatus, but when no alternative had presented itself, Dmitri had once again insisted that he be strapped in. Dmitri took a deep breath. "Let's do it then." The 3 other scientists standing behind the table with monitoring equipment each gave him a nod, and with that, Dmitri disappeared into the depths. "Dr. Sheffield, do you read me?" Dmitri was startled by the sudden voice in his ear. He'd almost forgotten about the earpiece he was wearing. "Yes, Dr. Yutani, I hear you loud and clear," he replied. "All right, we're going to accelerate your descent a bit, otherwise we'll be here all day." Dr. Yutani sounded tired. "Besides, we don't want you down there any longer than necessary." "Neither do I," thought Dmitri. Even in the moon's low gravity, he could feel his stomach drop as his descent quickly accelerated. Dr. Yutani checked in with him at regular intervals to confirm that their communication was still working, and to notify him of the depth of his descent. 200 meters, 300 meters, 400, 500, 600, 700. "Nearing the end of the rope now," she informed Dmitri at 800 meters. If we lose communication, just... The rest was inaudible. I'll just tug the rope and you'll pull me back up, Dmitri said to himself. After plummeting what was probably a few hundred meters more, he jerked to a sudden halt. That's the end of the rope, Dmitri said out loud. He wasn't sure why he suddenly felt the need to narrate. He could almost convince himself that he was doing it for the recording device on his arm, or in the small hope that Dr. Yutani and the others could still hear him, but secretly he knew. He simply wished to break the unsettling silence that commanded this deep and dark void. All right, let's have some light, he said as he turned on the small lamp on his helmet. Dmitri slowly rotated it on the rope to inspect all sides of the tunnel. Only now did it occur to him how narrow the tunnel really was. If he got stuck somehow, there was no way for anyone to help him out. He desperately tried to dismiss the thought and focus on his work. Not much to see here, just more smooth black surfaces and... Hold on. There's some scratches here. Did I do that just now? No, they're not scratches. It appears to be some sort of writing. Dr. Yutani, if you're hearing this, prepare to make history. You're going to have a field day with this. I'll be sure to get some pictures for you. Dmitri, fully aware that he was suspended above unknown heights, carefully produced his camera from a pouch on his belt when the lamp on his helmet suddenly went out. Guess it's not just probes that end up malfunctioning down here. It's too dark now to take a photo, but... Dmitri reached into another pouch and carefully took out a pencil and a piece of paper. I'll make a copy of the etchings for you, Dr. Yutani. You can thank me when I come back up. He placed the piece of paper over the etchings and proceeded to rub it with the pencil. Copying all of the writing took longer than he would have liked. It wasn't easy to find some of the small markings in the pitch-black darkness, so the work was tedious and fiddly. Yet the soft scratching on the pencil had a soothing quality to it. It managed to chase away the silence and took his mind off the endless depths beneath him. By the time Dmitri was done with his task, he had gotten so used to the sound of the scratching pencil that it still lingered in his head. A welcome reprieve from the unnerving silence, he thought, until he realized two things. It wasn't in his head, and it wasn't scratching. They were whispers. Overcome by a sudden and severe dread, Dmitri frantically jerked on the rope. There was no response. As Dmitri kept tugging on the rope, the whispers grew louder, or perhaps they were getting closer. Dmitri started yelling up the shaft. Pull me up! Get me out of here, please! He swore he heard laughter coming from down below. As Dmitri's heart was beating in his chest and his stomach started to turn inside out, he tried climbing up the rope in a panic. Finally, he felt the sweet release of slowly being lifted up towards the surface. Faster! Please go faster! He pleaded the moment communication was restored. What's going on, Dr. Sheffield? Dr. Whitfield's voice was music to Dmitri's ears. I don't know, he replied. Just get me back up. Later that day, Dmitri returned to his private quarters and plumped down on the bed, exhausted. He hadn't told anyone about the whispers in the dark for fear of being mocked, or worse, being declared mentally unfit. He had already played back the audio tape from his recorder on the way back to his quarters, and was unable to discern any unusual sounds. This either meant the whispers were on a wavelength that couldn't be picked up by a microphone, or he was indeed going insane. He wasn't sure which was scarier. He had, however, showed Dr. Yutani the etchings he had copied, much to her delight and gratitude. It appeared the writing consisted of one word repeated over and over. Thanks to some earlier linguistic discoveries made at other lunar sites, Dr. Yutani was able to create a rough translation of the word, or rather something that approximated its meaning. Punishment for the wicked or curious. As people of science, they had all agreed how disturbing it was that, to the civilization that came up with this word, curiosity was a concept to be closely associated with wickedness, something to be punished. As he contemplated the day's events, Dmitri quickly fell asleep. He couldn't wait to go back home. He awoke later that night, startled by the sounds of loud whispering, and switched on the light next to his bed. It wasn't working, and his eyes hadn't yet gotten used to the dark, so he instead listened intently. The whispers had stopped. All he heard now was the soft, familiar buzzing of a ceiling lamp. Dmitri wondered how the light could be on if his room was still shrouded in darkness. He rubbed the hills of his hands against his eyes, trying hopelessly to rub the blackness out of them. His befuddlement slowly turned to horror as he came to the terrifying realization that he had gone blind. Panicking, Dmitri stumbled out of bed, felt his bare feet touch the cold floor, and quickly, but carefully, made his way to the door. He searched for the handle, opened the door, and stumbled into the hallway. "Help!" he stammered. "Somebody help!" No one answered. He continued into the common area of the base, which he knew to be consistently occupied by crew members returning from their shifts. Is anyone here?" he asked, and waited. Again there was no response, but as he listened closer, he noticed another presence in the room. He could hear them breathing. "Hello? Can you hear me?" he tried again. "I can't see. I think I'm blind." The breathing became heavier, but there was no reply. Without knowing what came over him, Dmitri yelled out in frustration and fear, stomping his feet like a frustrated child. "Please help me!" The breathing suddenly stopped and changed into a deeply unsettling guttural sound. Fear slowly started to take hold of Dmitri. Just when he was about to turn around and run into the hallway, the guttural noise faded into what sounded like a dying breath. Held back by doubt, but compelled by curiosity, he approached the source of the sound. He reached out his hand, but no one was there. Dmitri was both perplexed and overcome by a frightful panic. He felt like he was going mad. Nothing made sense. He just wanted to leave this nightmare and go home, but home was 1,000,000 miles away. He knew he was alone here, and no one would be coming to help him. It was then he heard the voices again whispering to him. As the murmurs grew louder, Dmitri was almost able to make out individual words in a language wholly unknown to him, or any other man. Its harsh consonants and unearthly vowels chilled him to the bone. Dmitri covered his ears to make it stop, but the nameless voices only grew more incessant, hounding him, compelling him to listen, until he understood the meanings of their words. "This is how you die." Dmitri tried to scream, but there was no sound. He reached for his throat and felt his skin peel away. "Dr. Sheffield? Come in, Dr. Sheffield!" Dmitri was suddenly startled by the voice in his earpiece. He didn't realize where he was, until he noticed he was suspended in the air. He was still inside the hole. Had he been dreaming? As he ascended the shaft, he wondered which part had been a dream and what had been reality. It all felt the same to him. He quickly searched his pouch and found the etchings he had made. Everything that had occurred after he copied the notes must have been some kind of hallucination, he concluded, possibly caused by a gas or an unfamiliar type of radiation. The three scientists all looked at him eagerly as he climbed out of the hole. "Well, did you find anything down there?" Dr. Whitfield asked. "All we heard was static." "I have something that might interest Dr. Yutani," Dmitri said with a smile, trying to hide his anxiety. With a trembling hand, he produced the etchings from his pouch. "What's this?" Dr. Yutani asked as she carefully accepted the notes. "More writing from the strangers?" She studied the letters, hemming and hawing. "It's just one word repeated over and over. I need to cross-reference with the data list findings, but at first glance it seems to be about abuse or torture." "Or punishment?" added Dmitri, a fearful realization in his voice. "Well, yes," replied Dr. Yutani. She looked at Dmitri with bewilderment, more surprised than impressed by his linguistic knowledge. "Punishment for the wicked or curious," Dmitri said, his eyes wide with fear. Dr. Remington looked at the others in confusion, then at Dmitri. "How did you know?" Dmitri snapped back to reality. We've had this conversation before." "Is it possible you're having deja vu?" asked Dr. Remington. "No," Dmitri replied. "I'm sure. I remembered what those writings meant," he said, as he frantically pointed at the notes Dr. Yutani was holding. "Are you saying you've seen what exactly? The future?" Dr. Whitfield asked. He sounded incredulous. Dmitri's shoulders slumped as his gaze dropped to the floor. "Yes, I think so." There was a long silence, and he didn't dare guess what the others thought of him. "Well, if you saw the future, what happens next?" Dr. Remington asked with some trepidation. Dmitri tried to find the words. "I'll go to sleep, and when I wake tomorrow, I'll be blind, and everyone else will be gone. I'm going to die here alone." The other scientists quietly glanced at each other. Dr. Yutani was the first to speak. I'm sure it won't play out like that. Her words were meant to be comforting, but lacked conviction. It was probably some kind of hallucination, said Dr. Whitfield as he placed a hand on Dmitri's shoulder. Nothing to worry about. Dmitri just stared into empty space, his eyes filled with dread. They all arrived at the living quarters about an hour later. On the way over, Dmitri had listened to those recordings and couldn't make out anything out of the ordinary. Perhaps the others were right. Perhaps it was all just in his head. Yet he couldn't shake the feeling that he had seen his imminent and unavoidable future. A slow and terrifying death, surrounded by darkness, trapped in an alien place. Chills ran down his spine. He lay himself on bed and quickly fell asleep. He couldn't wait to go back home. Later that night, Dmitri awoke to the sound of cold and hollow whispers in the darkness. He didn't bother turning on the light this time.
Dreams
And nightmares.
with Poe and Munro. So Simeon's written in to say, I'm climbing the stairs of a tall stone tower, and it just keeps going up and up and up, and I always wake up before I reach the top. What do you think, Poe?
Well, that is quite an interesting dream. I would say he is someone who wants to reach heights that they've never seen, and I think they're very ambitious, and they might be a little over ambitious.
Well, I can in fact tell you that a tower does in fact symbolize a quest for understanding.
Understanding?
And climbing stairs can show that you're achieving your goals.
Oh, so he is achieving his goals.
So, what I think is happening here is that you are striving for success, but you don't feel worthy of it. And it could be you're suffering from imposter syndrome, which is actually quite a common thing to suffer from. But what I can say to you, Simeon, is that you need to start believing in yourself. It's very important that you believe in yourself, and if good things happen to you, then please just embrace them. Embrace them and keep moving forward and keep striving for the best. Thank you for your dreams.
Welcome to Poe's Curiosity Shop. Alice, this object that I've just handed to you, what do you think it is?
Well, I'm not sure what it is, but what I do know is that it has three circles all attached in the center.
Yes.
And it's tiny. And it's made of, I think, metal.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's metal.
Mm-hmm. We had the same metal in one of our earlier shows. Do you remember? It was the same material.
Oh, it must be bronze.
Correct.
I see, but it's small as well, and it has 3 circles attached.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not sure. I mean, I suppose today you could wear it as a brooch, maybe, or a belt buckle. I'm not sure.
Yeah, why would people, in ancient times, why might people wear this?
Would they tie it around themselves, perhaps? Attach it to some leather, maybe?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, again, it's a theme that we've visited before in our shows. It's a Bronze Age amulet with 3 circles. It was excavated at Brindley Hill, the site of a standing circle within August. You might have seen it. Legend says that it wards off evil spirits while traversing the ley line network.
Well, I wish we could give everyone in August one of those.
Poe's Curiosity Shop is now closed.
You're listening to Radio August. Dark Nights with Poe and Munro.
The Calling. Read by Jessa from the Jessa Channel. I love you, she said. Then she cut off her face in front of me. It took a lot of effort with the butter knife, alternately plunging and trying to saw. A curtain of blood ripped under her chin. It caught her still smiling mouth as part of her head tipped forward and free. I expected to see a dripping cross-section of frontal lobe, nasal cavities, and sinuses, but her head was completely empty, a black void. I stared into the hole. It spoke. Your body is nothing more than a prison for your consciousness. Your wardens have long since forgotten you. Free yourself. When I used the knife, it hurt, and I passed out. Perhaps I was the messenger. Yes, I understand now. I'm the messenger. It is the others I must set free.
Dreams
And nightmares.
with Poe and Munro. So, we have Gabby's dream. So Gabby said that she's grocery shopping, and when she finally gets to the checkout, there's a huge queue. Now, when she gets to the cashier, she realizes she's left her money at home. And then the cashier makes her put everything back on the shelves, but it never ends. And every time she comes back to the cart, it seems more full than before. Wow. I do like dreams like this, Poe. Please tell me what you think about this one.
Yeah, so, again, there's someone stuck in a loop. I find that always interesting. So it's an unresolved issue.
Very good.
That's something you could say about most dreams that are recurring dreams.
Of course.
There's an unresolved issue here, but it's related to shopping, and I'm wondering what the shopping stands for, whether it's probably not literal. I mean, as you know, Munro, you've interpreted so many dreams. She made her put everything back on the shelves. So it's almost someone puts a lot of effort into something, but they don't get redeemed for it. They have to put everything back the way it was.
You know what, Poe? I think you might need a promotion.
to deputy dream interpreter.
I mean, keep going the way you're going, and I might be out of a job.
Oh, we need you, Alice.
Well, so what I can tell you is shopping relates to needs and desires. So Gabby, what you're having dreams about here, so it's your grocery shopping. So that in particular is a physical need for life. So what we're also dealing with here is the loss of money. What you'll often find with dreams is that the loss of money actually relates to a loss of self-identity. So Poe was very close with what he was saying, because the impression that I get from this dream and from your explanation of this dream is that perhaps, Gabby, you might always be giving more to other people than you receive. A relationship, perhaps, where you feel that others see you as someone else's significant other, rather than actually having your own identity as yourself. Now, for me personally, I believe that every relationship that you have with someone should be equal, and you should be loved for who you are. And maybe that is something that perhaps, Gabby, you might have to challenge in your life. What do you think, Poe?
That's some wonderful advice, Alice, and I think it's a lot of food for thought for this listener, and I hope she takes some wonderful lessons from it.
Thank you for your dreams.
You're listening to Radio August, Dark Nights with Poe and Munro. Welcome to Poe's Curiosity Shop. Do you have an inkling what this might be?
So, what I can see here are 3 small metal bells attached to what looks like a square, metal square, and then it kind of looks like the tag you get in the zipper.
Oh, you were right about the metal. It's bronze again.
Bronze again. Okay. The bells are very cute.
Mm-hmm.
They've got small engraving on them.
What kind of objects normally have bells?
Cowbells.
Hmm.
No? What else has bells? I want to say a Christmas tree, but I feel like...
Well, these are spirit chimes.
Oh.
These ones have an inverted full crown, which gives a ghastly sound. We're not going to reproduce that here now. It's like a bell ringing in reverse. The purpose of most spirit chimes is to keep spirits away, as you might know. However, these ones are to invite spirits in.
Oh.
Unfortunately, they don't work. I mean, I've had them hanging up at the station for a few months now. Unless, Munro, have you noticed any spirits turning up at the station lately?
So does it just invite bad spirits, or?
Not necessarily bad spirits, just could be good spirits. Yeah, well, I think I'm going to sell that one. There's no other use for it. Thanks, Munro. As always, you've been a great sport today. And we'll be back tomorrow. Poe's Curiosity Shop is now closed. You're listening to Radio August, Dark Nights with Poe and Munro.
The sprinklers hiss down. I crawl out of Jimmy's upside-down Toyota, clutching his spare magazine. Need to count the bullets. 9. Just 9. 8 for Emma, and 1 for me. I kiss each bullet for luck as I reload them. Rising to my feet, I slide the magazine into the Smith & Wesson. Lockdown sirens blare, but the cavalry's not coming. Jimmy's already dead. I am the cavalry. Dr. Thatcher's black BMW is strewn on its side, engine crushed against the concrete wall. It's in far better shape than he is. I limp past the wreck towards the exit ramp. At the top, a reinforced steel wall now separates the lab's underground car park from the outside world. And with my back against it, I may have time to take all 8 shots before Emma reaches me. She's fast. Too fast for Jimmy to hit. She tore straight through his gut, pulling out his spine like an afterthought. I grabbed his gun and ran as she shredded the screaming lab techs like paper dolls. There's no way I'm dying like that. No way. If 8 bullets can't stop her, I'll eat the 9th. Months ago, the eggheads on Smoke Break told Jimmy that the Emma project had failed. Gene pattern was unstable or some such bullshit. Sent down to the vault for further military evaluation, like the rest of Thacker's creations. She had already been here once. It was just a matter of time until she returns. I wade across the puddle gathering at the base of the ramp. My thumb caresses the safety, ensuring it's off. As I reach the steel wall, the garage plunges into total darkness. The sirens wheeze to a halt before my eyes can adjust. The emergency lighting kicks in. How the hell she managed that, I have no idea. The door from the west stairwell crashes open. I raise Jimmy's gun, but she's in cover before I can aim. She weaves her way around wrecked cars, drawing even closer. My first shot goes wide, but it's enough to send her sprinting directly for me. The second shot clips her side. The third misses. She vaults from the puddle at the base of the ramp, her hospital gown smothered in blood. The fourth hits her square in the chest. I put another there, and another. The seventh slows her approach to a stagger. The eighth forces her to her knees, just a few feet down slope. She raises her head and howls. Eyes locked, I put that 9th bullet straight through her skull. Spraying crimson, she spills backward onto the concrete slope. My legs fail, and I slide my back against the steel. Jimmy's empty gun falls to the floor. All that's left is my sobbing and the sprinklers. Until Emma slowly rises.
You're listening to Radio August. Dark Nights with Poe and Munro.
Mother, read by Brandy Clark. After Mother died, Pen started putting on weight. The pasty roll of fat that bulged over the waist of her jeans secretly pleased her. It was her own little fat roll. Look how big she'd grown. Wasn't she looking well? Part of her wanted to keep it, but she couldn't, not with how it mocked her. See, it said. Mother was right. You are fat. You can't be trusted. You need her. Pen tried. She really did. She starved herself. She'd done it before. She could do it again. Except before was different. Before, Mother was there. Giving up, are we? She said, as Pen reached for a slice of bread. I wouldn't if I were you, if Pen even thought about opening the fridge. Then, it had been easy to stay thin. Now, without Mother, Pen failed like she failed everything else. By lunchtime, she'd cut a small square of cheese because she was weak. By late afternoon, she'd taken one of Mother's favorite lemon biscuits and ate it in her bedroom like she was 13 again, sucking on stolen sauce packets from the school canteen. It wasn't her fault. It was too hard. The gnawing emptiness of the house was bad enough without the gnawing in her stomach. Still, all this proved one thing. Pen still needed her mother. The first appointment at the clinic cost most of Mother's jewelry. Then there was the vessel to pay for. That cost Pen her books and a few items of clothing. Even so, a human vessel was out of the question. Animals were cheaper. Bigger ones cost more, but only one kind would do. The African gray was a good fit for Mother. They had the same beady eyes, the same smug expression, the same petulant squawks. Pen didn't bother with a cage. She didn't need one. The bird took up a perch on the back of Mother's armchair, watching her with talonous disapproval. The sight of the bird's claws, her mother's claws, piercing the chair's upholstery, pierced Pen's eyes. She didn't have to try anymore, or fail anymore. She just had to do as she was told, like the good girl she always was. Look at the baby, the parrot squawked. Poor baby Pen, cry baby Pen, pull yourself together. And just like that, Pen pulled herself together. After a couple of weeks, Pen's little fat roll shrank away, like an attic mouse she'd foolishly dreamed of keeping. In truth, the parrot was better at being Mother than Mother had been. It was a sharper eyesight, perhaps. When Pen stole a breadcrumb from the kitchen counter, the parrot saw. Can't even resist a crumb, it sang. What a joke you are! In 2 months, Pen grew thinner than she'd ever been. Thinner and harder. There were no more soft little rolls of fat to make her tender. Just thin skin and hard bones. And then, after a while, not even that.
Open at Midnight by Martin Owton, read by Laceya Finley. The old man hobbled slowly down the street, leaning heavily on his tripod-ended walking stick. He paused to pull his tattered overcoat more tightly around his thin body as the bitter east wind blew litter around his spindly legs. He pulled his cap down more firmly, blew on his fingers, then resumed his painful progress. From the doorway of the boarded-up shop across the street, 2 young men watched. The low cloud had brought the day to a premature dusk, and the cold wind had driven people off the streets, and this old-timer was out late. The youths nodded to each other, took final swigs from their cans of beer, and strolled blithely down the pavement, tracking the pensioner. The old man reached the entrance to an alleyway that led down past the churchyard. Halfway down the alley was a patch of deep shadow where the street lamp had been vandalized. He paused for a moment, then turned into the narrow entrance. The young men looked up and down the street, then lengthening their strides, stepped into the road. The first time scared the shit out of me. Night after night, I dreamt of bloody, violent death, and if I tried to stay awake, I slipped into a twilight world where I hallucinated the deaths of those around me. So I did it. Long after midnight, I went down to the churchyard where the winos hung out. There was a good chance one of them would be sleeping it off in some quiet, sacred corner. I found one, opened the gates of madness, and experienced the beast's feeding frenzy for the first time. It changed my life. Easy to say, harder to live through. A magnitude 8 earthquake shattered my world. I took an overdose enough to kill me 5 times over. I suspect I survived because the beast wasn't ready to relinquish its host. I spent 7 weeks in a mental institution trying to rebuild my life, to find a way to live with the intolerable. At first they tried to get me to talk about it. I couldn't tell them what had driven me to breaking point, the fear of discovery or the endless replays in my head. So they loaded me up with antipsychotics, smothering my brain in cotton wool, and sat me in a corner while they decided their observations. Then they sent me back into the world with a letter for my physician and a bottle of tranquilizers. I was very, very lucky I was not connected with the police manhunt after the body was found. Maybe it's true that the devil looks after his own. Tonight's the night. It's been building up in me for the last 8 days, so tonight I'll go looking for trouble. The gates of madness open at midnight. There's no point in trying to fight it, so I have to try and keep as much control as I can. Out there, it's a chill night, and there's been rain, so I can keep the hood up on my parka without looking suspicious on the surveillance cameras. I take the train down to King's Cross, more anonymous than the tube, and fewer cameras. Pulled up the hood and walk out into the rain. The Pentonville Road beckons, and I lose myself in the dingy side streets. It's late, chucking out time in the pubs when the punters headed for the takeaway kebabs and dog meat curries. The few bedraggled tarts stand in doorways offering their tawdry charms without conviction. A taxi speeds by me, splashing me with spray from the puddles in the road. I weave and stumble a bit, just a bloke who's had a skinful and is asking to get rolled. I feel hostile eyes on the back of my head as I head towards the dark end of the street. Footsteps behind me, soft, but to my heightened awareness, nearly deafening. Is this the one? I slow down, give an innocent passerby the chance to save himself. The footsteps slow. Within me, the beast snarls and slobbers in anticipation. A couple walk on the other side of the street, engrossed in each other. The footsteps behind me cease. I sense he has slipped into the dark of a doorway. The distraction passes, and the game resumes. He thinks he is stalking me, but I have a greater need of a quiet corner than he. From the clatter of the footsteps, there is only one person following me. That is good. I don't know how many the beast could take. I once watched it overwhelm 3 skinheads who thought I was their victim, and they were young, strong, and used to getting stuck in. It was worse the second time. I'd convinced myself I was over it, that I was okay, that I could live a normal life. Wrong. So wrong. At least I knew what to do when the dream started. I was able to prepare, get some clothes together, do a bit of reconnaissance. I couldn't count on being so lucky a second time. It still tore my head apart when the beast came through. I tried to defy the beast a couple of times, but I learned pretty soon that it was futile. I've had to cut myself off from any close relationships if I wanted to have any kind of worthwhile lifestyle. A steady girlfriend or a wife is out of the question. I simply cannot afford to have anyone around when the beast wakes. Casual relationships have foundered on this rock. "You won't let anyone get close to you" is a phrase I've heard more than a few times. It's true, and of course, I will not tell them why. There's no predictable pattern to it. Years can go on quietly, but I once had to feed the beast twice in 6 weeks. I usually get about a week's warning, so clearly holidays are out. I dare not be anywhere where I don't know the ground well. Work was difficult, so I went freelance as soon as I could manage to earn enough to make ends meet. Then at least that worked out pretty well. Programming makes me good money. I can work from home and no one misses me if I drop out of circulation for a week or two. I find myself wondering how many others there are out there. How many beasts? Or am I just one amongst many vehicles for a single slayer? There surely must be others. Cannot believe I am unique amongst all mankind, and if I am, then why me? I've tried to be discriminating in my victims. No true innocents have been fed to the beast, though that first time was pretty close. But everyone since has put themselves in my path. It's a way to live with the monstrosity of it. It's barbaric, but at least I tell myself the slayer only takes those that the world is better off without. I find a good spot. The entrance to a yard, deep in shadow, under dark walls with a shuttered double door. Just a drunk taking a piss. I stagger into the killing ground. For a moment, I think the footsteps are going to pass, but he, and it is always he, is just being careful before he doubles back. I take my time, leaning forward, hands on hips. The slayer quivers with anticipation within me. Hey, mate, you got a light? His voice is higher pitched than I expected, nerves making him speak, perhaps. I turn slowly as if I'm a little off balance. Sorry, I don't smoke. I look him in the face. He looks rough. Sweating, even though it's after midnight and cool. His eyes are glazed over with large pupils. The spots on his neck seem to shine in the distant neon. I can smell his breath, sour with the stink of rotting teeth. A smackhead, I guess, in need of his medicine. Well, he had more choices about his life than me. Fuck you! Give me the money! He pulls out the knife from inside his jacket, 8 inches, big enough to skewer an elephant. And I'm relieved. I needed to see the threat. I relax and open the gates, let the slayer come through. Ringside seat as the Terminator or Bruce Lee or Mike Tyson or all three combined takes control of my body and pours through it. The wild exhilaration of the beast sets my senses on fire, even though I'm riding pillion. The hunter now becomes the hunted, freezes. My hand seize him with strength many times my own. My right hand crushes his larynx as the left reaches the knife from his, dislocating his elbow. Blood gushes from his mouth and nose. I turn his head away to avoid the spray and feel his neck break under my hand. The beast drinks in his life force as it spills out, greedily lapping it like a cat at pool of spilled milk. A great warm surge of energy courses through me, just a trickle of the stream the slayer is drawing in. The broken body crumbles in my grasp. He has fouled himself. I can smell the shit mingled with the hot blood. I toss the body away, expecting it to flutter in the air, the torn wrapper of a toothsome morsel. The ecstasy fades, recalling me to the coldness of the night. Time to get out of here. Not running. That draws attention. Walk briskly and purposefully away from the broken heap in the shadows. A long walk to the night bus, past a couple of stops, missing one bus. A thin drizzle mists the streetlight. I pull my hood closer, seeking anonymity, meeting no eyes as I walk. Trafalgar Square at last, so full of people, none of them knowing. An almost post-orgasmic lethargy fills me as I wait in the rain. By the time the night bus arrives, the high has passed, leaving me drained and depressed, and as I think about the weeks ahead of me, the paranoid wait to see if they're going to catch me this time. I pay the driver and head for the back of the bus, sit by a window and watch London go by as through the grimy glass. Then there's another long walk through the rain, the tiredness dragging on my legs, the muscles taut with cramp. Safe home at last. A 1-bedroom flat in the most anonymous block I could find. I relax in a warm bath and wonder whether they've found the body yet. feel the satiated slumber of the beast, and the memory of the assault grows hazy. I long to sleep myself, but everything must be put in order. The clothes I wore are bagged and ready for disposal. I'll take them to the dump tomorrow first thing. Then I'll need to trawl through the charity shops ready for the next time. Because there will be a next time, and another after that. Hopefully I'll get a bit of peace, and my life can be normal for a while, but in the longer term I can see no end to it. I know I can't resist the Slayer's needs, and I have no idea how long it will continue, so I am left with the image of myself 60 years from now, battering a victim with my walking frame to feed the beast. The old man walked down the alley as fast as his arthritis would allow him. He was looking forward to a good long soak in a hot bath to restore the circulation to his extremities, and after that, well, he needed a new coat anyway. He wondered how many times more he would have to do this. It had been a good while since the last. Maybe now he was so frail the beast would release him and grant him peace in his final years. Surely it owed him that. In his heart, he doubted it was over. In 60 years, the Slayer had never been merciful. Back in the deep shadow, beneath the broken street lamp, lay the bodies of 2 young men.
You're listening to Radio August, Dark Night with Poe and Munro.
Contagion by Ashley Van Hesteren. Read by Adam Day. The demon really did spread like a virus. Easier, probably. A virus needs contact. Shared air, a passing germ, a gentle touch. But this monster was not that limited. All this needed was an audience to be infectious. And it's so easy here. There's so much theatricality surrounding this demon so much ritual, so much awful curiosity. It made infecting one after another as easy as walking down the street past the tree, past the bridge, past the nearly empty house, the field of stones. It started with one, the first domino to be pushed down. She was young. They usually are. They're easier to infect young. They listen. It took time for her fall, but the demon knew. Sooner or later she would, and there would be a tidal wave to feast upon, and this demon was nothing if not patient, ever present. Until the virus got her, until the sickness spread, the demon could only enjoy that girl trapped in his teeth. Prepare for the moment, the tipping point when she would finally cut her strings and fly. There was a process to this. The young, susceptible, high-risk groups already have a home for the demon in their heart. Most people do anyway. A hollow home for the whispers to rest, implant, and grow the demon. The demon would grow stronger, too big for its stolen place, pushing lungs out of the way until breathing hurts. He whispers in the heart of his host until there would be nothing left, and only the fall could quiet him, and he could infect someone else. That girl, that first girl, she was no different. She was nearly there already without the demon's whispers. There was so little light left to feast on in her world, in her every moment of calm, every smile, every restful night. He tainted all of it. There was nothing left. And now it was just a waiting game, until she got to her lonely, nearly empty home every night, night after night. When she finally had enough of the burning in her chest, the weight on her shoulders, the pain from the demon's whispers around her hollowed out heart, he gave her a moment of peace. She made her decision, and the resolve soothed the scratches in her throat. She tried to reach out in that subtle human way. Of course she did. That's just nature. She knew where this sickness was going as easily as she could see the light at the end, and she was afraid as much as calm. "Take my ring," she'd say. "I know I love it, but I don't need it anymore. When I'm gone, Mom will take care of my cat. No one will miss me anyway." No one heard her. They never do. All humans don't want to die. But more than that, humans don't want to be in pain. So she succumbed to the sickness, or tried at least. Girls almost never get it right on the first try. Her red hair fanned out around her pillow as she laid back, holding the bottle above her, note on the pillow beside her, her final bedfellow. "Pills don't hurt, right?" She'd been like this that day, rationalizing to the demon parasite in her heart. "Of course they don't. You'll sleep, and it'll be over. What's it matter anyway?" "Yeah," and the bottle opened in her hands. "It'll be over. It'll be over. No longer a burden. No more pain. No more. No more." But of course there was more. Pills don't work very well. She'd only gotten sick, was taken to the hospital before the pills tore apart her liver. The doctors, the ones who cared enough to see the signs, helped her, or tried at least. And the demon was quieted for a while, until he wasn't. More time, and the girl tried again. Nothing got better for her. She tried again, rewrote the note, redid the demon's ritual, just different enough to work this time. The virus ready to spread. The blood stained the porcelain and he relished in it. The pain let go, finally, and that fed him too. She was dead. The demon had outgrown his host, gotten too big for her poor soul to bear, tore her apart and bled out with her, her true final bedfellow. But the virus wasn't quite spreading yet. That death alone couldn't start the contagion. It needed an audience. And they made it so easy. They paraded her face on posters, told her tragic story, painted the town red with her hair and her blood, satiated the awful curiosity of the audience, fed the other demons, gave them a bigger home, a louder voice, and let them spread. A boy this time. Good. They were more successful. After the first domino falls, the rest go quickly. Always. He was a football player. Big, loud, and sure. Good. He wouldn't take long. The demon knew it, and he didn't. The demons are already there. They just need ears to listen. It wasn't hard to make the boy listen after the first bell. No one would go to your funeral. You'd be better off. So would your father and sister. There was nothing here. A little lying goes a long way after the virus starts to spread. He only needed to write one letter. Only needed to walk to the bridge once. Stare over the river's flow with an empty kind of longing once. Like needing to go home after a long day of pain, finding the water below like you'd find the bed sheets at night. He was dead. The demon had outgrown his host, gotten too big for this poor soul to bear, tore him apart and drowned with him, tangled together in the water. They didn't make it as easy with that boy. They listened to the psychologists, but it was already too late. The demon didn't need each other. After the first domino was knocked to the dirt, the next was another boy, slight for his age, light enough to not snap the tree branch or his trachea. The note they found in his room led them down the street, past the bridge, past the empty house, to the forest. He was long dead when they found him. The demon had outgrown his host again, gotten too big for his poor heart to bear, tore him apart and choked with him, draped from the branches like flower pots hanging from a funeral home ceiling. And yet more dominoes fell, landing at the heads of graves in the field of stones. Unstoppable, relentless waves eroding the people on shore until only the sand remained. The demon always spread like a virus from person to person, with no touch, no shared germ, no shared air, just an audience full of awful curiosity.
Welcome to Poe's Curiosity Shop. Okay, Alice, this is what I brought in today. What do you think it is?
Oh, wow.
Tell the listeners a bit more about what the object is that I brought in today.
So it's quite small, fits in the palm of your hand, and it's a small man wearing robes, and he looks like he's in quite a lot of pain.
Yes. Where could he be from, this man?
I'm not sure, actually. He's maybe a Buddhist?
Yeah, could be, yes.
What
would you say is his profession?
Something religious, I suppose. He's wearing robes. He's wearing a monk, yes.
Well done.
But why is he in pain?
Very good question. I can answer that for you. It's a porcelain figure, ancient Chinese, seated and howling.
Oh.
It's called the Screaming Monk. Legend has it that this monk, called Busan, accidentally glimpsed Queen Ankesenemon undressing, the wife of King Tut. The king ordered that Busan be shrunk by mystics, and the process caused the pain you see on his face. These tattoos are a reminder that some things are best left unseen. Several were made, apparently. But as far as I can tell, I have the only one.
Well, I wish I hadn't seen this.
Poe's Curiosity Shop is now closed.
You're listening to Radio August, Dark Nights with Poe and Munro.
Welcome to Poe's Curiosity Shop. There you go, Alice. What's this object? What do you think?
Well, it's quite heavy, and it feels like maybe, I think perhaps it's metal of some sort. It's like an Asian animal, but I'm not sure.
What animal do you think it might be?
It's perhaps a Chinese dragon?
Not quite a dragon.
Or a lion with wings?
You're right.
A winged lion?
Lion dog, actually.
Oh, right. Of course.
You were right about Asian, a Chinese bronze lion dog statue.
With wings.
With wings. One of a pair originally donated to August's public library by Lord Worthing, but later sold to raise funds. The library burned down 3 weeks after their sale. Would you believe it?
Wow.
They normally come in pairs and have many uses, but when used correctly in a pair, it's feng shui, guards against evil.
Oh, wow.
That's what can happen when you sell something that guards against evil.
I think I'd quite like to have a guard against evil.
Particularly in August at the moment. Poe's Curiosity Shop is now closed.
Dreams
and nightmares
with Poe and Munro. So we've just had a dream come in from Lena. Well, if I'm honest, Lena, it sounds a bit of a nightmare.
Nightmares.
Firstly, thank you for writing this one in. She says, I dream that I'm in a strange house, but in the dream it's my house, and I'm discovering lots of empty rooms I'd forgotten I had. Every time I find a new room, there's another room leading off it. But then I start noticing all these holes in the room, big dark holes in the walls with bugs crawling out of them until the whole room is covered in bugs. I don't know about you, Poe, but I don't really like the sound of that very much.
That is very creepy, but it's kind of my territory. It's very Poe-esque.
Absolutely.
Different rooms, different rooms, different areas, different parts of her life. They're all these different, perhaps different aspects of her life have holes in them. So all these different parts have issues or unresolved issues that have not been filled and have not been repaired. So I think perhaps she's experiencing issues in different aspects of her life, and it's a perpetual circle of negativity that happens in each aspect of her life. That's why she hasn't filled those holes.
Well, what I can tell you is that houses represent your soul and sense of self. So then the rooms, they represent potential. So you're quite correct in what you're saying about filling up different aspects of her life and things like that. And I think what the bugs represent are the anxieties and the fears. Now, Lena, it sounds like you're worried that you're not living up to your potential. And if I'm honest, I think you're also plagued by insecurities about your ability, perhaps, to be the person you wish you could be. But Lena, the thing is, if you can wish it, you can do it. Thank you for your dreams. You're listening to Radio August, Dark Nights with Poe and Munro.
Vanessa, read by Tex Murphy. The hole in her chest is the size of a cigarette. I can see straight through it from where I sit, even with the smoke trails from my gun. 6 weeks of cheating husbands and damsels in distress. That's what it took to pay for that alpaca couch she's bleeding out on. I've done a bad thing, and it's only Wednesday. Her name was Vanessa Quinn, and she was an onomat, or so she said. I'm not sure I believe they exist. Even now, if she was an onomat, she wasn't anymore. She told me to shoot her, so I did. Onomats are supposed to have that power. They tell you to do something, and then you can't resist. Except I think I shot her because I wanted to. It's a long story. Bang, bang, bang. The office door shook with the knocking from outside. What a time for company. Had I been set up? I'd shot Vanessa, and now I was literally holding a smoking gun about to get caught. Wait a minute, I called towards the door. Think. Quickly pulling out the desk drawers, I searched for some kind of solution. A pretzel, a postcard, a pair of pickle-shaped cufflinks. And there it is, in the bottom drawer, the patchwork quilt Mom sent me over 2 Christmases ago. I was never going to see any other kind of action, so I throw it over Vanessa's body and open the door. It's almost too late before I realize I'm still holding the gun. But I quickly stuff it down the back of my pants. Oh, it's hot. Officer Peters looks me up and down. She's hot too, but not as hot as the gun in the back of my pants. I wince. Yes, officer? We've had a report of gunshots. Coming from this building? Didn't hear a thing, I tell her, smiling sheepishly. Mind if I take a look around? Oh, not at all, I say, letting her through. Her tour of the office takes about 5 seconds. 5 solar seconds. And then she finds... nothing. Something catches her eye. She runs her fingers across the back of my couch. Alpaca? I nod, worriedly. She nods appreciatively. Mind if I try? I protest as she sits down, but it's too late. She's definitely sitting on Vanessa's bleeding body. She's armed, so I'll need to be quicker, or maybe run. The window, I could jump, say 20 flights. It's soft, she says. It's then I realize Vanessa's body's gone. Just the throw remains. Still stroking the couch, she continues. Why do you keep the quilt on it? I'm in shock. It can get pretty dirty, I reply. Oh, I'll bet it does, she winks. So, I was wrong. Apparently the quilt could have some action after all, but not tonight. There was a corpse walking around somewhere, and it didn't have many places to hide. Officer Peters sighs. I'll get going then. Heading for the door, she turns around one last time. Be careful, she whispers. I'm really not supposed to say this, but the chief thinks there's an onomat on the loose, and when they get in your head, you can't get them out. Well, if I hear something, I'll let you know. No, you don't want to hear anything, not from an onomat. If you find one, shoot it. That's the only way to deal with them. That's how we deal with them. With that, she's gone. I shut the door firmly behind her and retrieved the gun firmly behind me. Believe me now? I know that voice. I turn and see Vanessa upright on the couch, just like before I shot her. I believe you, I say, looking at my gun, but I just shot you. You didn't shoot me, she smiles. I told you to think that you'd shot me, and you did. So, my alpaca couch, I ask hopefully? Oh, the gunshot's real. The alpaca took it in the chest. I grimace. 6 weeks wasted. I knew I had a reason for wanting her dead. I point the gun at her and sneer. What do you want from me? I want you to help me make more onomats. I lower the gun. You mean like, babies? No, silly. I mean like this. She curls a finger to beckon me over. Come here. I move towards her, because I wanted to. It's your lucky day, she says. Yeah, you know what? She was right. I just got away with murder. It's my lucky day, I say. She places a softly scented palm on my forehead and whispers, because you're an onomat now. Yeah, because I'm an onomat now. She kisses me on the cheek and gives me a gentle push. Now, go and tell the chief.
You're listening to Radio August. Dark Nights with Poe and Munro. Welcome to Poe's Curiosity Shop. Today I've brought in a really cool object. So what might this be?
Well, it definitely looks like an alien. And from what I can see, it's like a alien, I suppose, with 2 alien babies. And then it's wearing a hat. And it's made of stone. They kind of look like semi-precious black eyes. They kind of look like lizards with a hat on.
Yeah, I mean, you were making a very good point there with the alien look. But it's quite an ancient object, isn't it? It's not modern.
Not at all.
This one is a sculpture that was found along with several others, similar sculptures, in a tunnel of caves in Mexico. Oh, I picked it up on eBay. It's supposed to be proof that aliens have visited our planet already, or at least Mexico.
Now that's a thought.
But, you know, I just thought it looked nice. Did you think so?
I think it's beautiful, but slightly frightening that it's from so long ago.
To be honest, it might just have been someone imagining that that's what aliens look like. Or it could be an observation of someone actually encountering someone who looks like this.
Perhaps.
Poe's Curiosity Shop is now closed.
Dark Nights with Poe and Munro.
The Bag Lady by David F. Shultz, read by Venomous Platypus. Breathing seems so loud when you want to stay hidden. Time oozed like molasses, cowering in the closet, peering through the crack. It floated there in the center of the loft. The Bag Lady. If it moved on, maybe escape was possible, but it just floated in the middle of the empty room, eerily silent. The vacant penthouse had a hallucinatory quality, dimly lit in blue. Through the tall glass windows that spanned the wall were many distant pinpricks of white, the lights of the city. It was cold. The room gave the impression of a fish tank, with twilight blue through the long windows and the Bag Lady floating, as if suspended in currents of unseen water. The Bag Lady changed form, not just undulations of hair or clothes, but a subtle morphing. The robes were fish scales, briefly, but again becoming cloth. Bedraggled hair was seaweed, then tentacles, each topped with an eyeball, only they weren't, except for a moment. The head was a monstrous mouth of some deep-sea horror, ringed with row on row of teeth, too impossibly large to fit in the room, and yet there it was, until it wasn't. Altering its form like camouflage, playing with the images and thoughts all called from its victims. There it floated, and then it turned to face me, Run or die, the door gave way from the stumbling push, and there was a long expanse of the room. Footsteps echoed on wood, the spinal shiver of pursuit up by a nightmare. A cold gaze grasped at my back. The air was thickened mud. Limbs slowed with each straining step. And then, stuck. I accepted my fate, hoped it would be over quickly. A blink, and there it was, clutching my shoulders with spider-like fingers. Black eyeless sockets led straight into its mind. A cold, dark tunnel, and at the bottom a mirage. Those teeth, that carnivorous circular maw, closing down like a spiked coffin. The vision vanished, and an alternative to death was offered. It wouldn't eat me, at least for now. It needed help with its camouflage. A human mind to wear, like a shell for a hermit crab. I agreed to help the bag lady with its disguise. Yes, I agreed to help. I thought to the bag lady that it will do no good for its disguise to float, since human beings don't float, except in water, and its disguise would be less unsettling if it had eyes, and were less of a corpse. But the entity did not understand the concept of water or air, floating or standing, living or dead. These things were all alien to it and meaningless. Its present form was an approximation of its first victim, a homeless lady named Bethany. Bethany had lived a life survived on a steadily dwindling income from prostitution as age, drugs, and street life took their toll on her market value. Until she ended up in the clutches of the entity in an empty penthouse lair, and the entity had devoured her and taken her form with a horrifying loss of fidelity. The disguise was decomposed, not decomposing flesh, but decomposing reality. A twisted amalgam of fears and haunting memories, a corporeal phantasm of nightmares, fraying at the edges. The bag lady. Without the capacity to understand human perception, the entity was blind to the weakness of its present disguise, but had other uses for me. Spidery fingers wrenched open my jaw, fingers with far too many segments which traced along the sides of my face and into my mouth, stretching it wide. The bag lady gaped its bile-stained mouth over my own and regurgitated a worm-like thing, no thicker than its fingers, but longer. Involuntary gags, reflexive, struggling, as the worm wriggled around my tongue and throat coated with mucus, probed. The worm didn't go down, but up into my nasal cavity, and then up further, until it was crawling inside my brain. Panic, panic! And gradually, as the worm settled, panic made way for dread. The worm was inside my skull, inside my brain. The bag lady drifted back to the center of the room and floated there. I was free to go, along with the worm, to observe for the bag lady, to do its bidding. It would eat me if I refused, perhaps starting with my brain, though it hadn't yet decided, and was curious about starting with feet. So I left and observed for the bag lady as I went, and relayed my thoughts through the worm. A new life with the bag lady's worm inside my brain. Small talk with the servers at the restaurant. Not this one, the worm had to be told incessantly. Not these ones, the worm had to be told as people strolled past on the sidewalk. Not this one, the worm had to be told when talking with coworkers in asset management. I looked into the eyes of the people I spoke with, and they looked into mine. And the worm looked at us both, increasingly impatient. And maybe the people sensed it, sensed something was wrong, just behind my eyes, but they didn't comprehend the true horror. The bag lady was getting hungry. "Spare some change?" a homeless man said. He wore torn clothes, held a cardboard sign in hand, and smelled of urine. The worm probed, and the worm did not hear the usual refrain. Not this one. What's special about this one? The answer was nothing, which may have been precisely the point. How about something to eat, I said, or the worm said, or somehow both together. A jingle of coins, a handful of change to buy him a coffee, and a conversation. A talk about his life, and to find that his name was George. George had lost his job and his family and couldn't work because of pinched nerves, or so he said. Perhaps his story was embellished for panhandling, but the worm didn't care. The worm insisted that the bag lady was waiting for me to demonstrate my usefulness, or else be eaten tonight. So George found out that there was a great place he could sleep, better than the street or the shelters, a building with a vacant penthouse. George wanted to know if I was the owner, so I said yes, which is true in a way. And we went to the top floor of that building, to the empty penthouse lair, to the room bathed in blue light, with the glass walls like a fish tank, where the city sleeps below, unaware of what lurks above them, where the floating entity waits inside for those who keep finding their way, like a deep-sea fish dangling its lure. The bag lady appeared and changed forms, and the screams lasted just a moment, maybe a fraction of a second, before George was gone. Then the bag lady floated there, silent and saddened, while I watched from the crack of the closet. I always watch from inside the closet.
You're listening to Radio August, Dark Nights with Poe and Munro.